You know how a totally amazing vacation can feel like was ruined just because of a miserable flight home? Or how a fantastic movie gets torpedoed by a terrible ending? Well, according to the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, that's not just some random quirk. It's actually a battle raging inside your own mind, a conflict between two different selves that are fighting over the story of your life. So, let's get right into this.
And we're going to start with a really strange experiment, one that kind of perfectly nails the mystery of how we make decisions, and it forces you to ask a pretty uncomfortable question about yourself.
Okay, so picture this. You're in a lab, and you have to stick your hand into painfully cold water. You've already done it twice. The first time, it was for a full 60 seconds. The second time, it was for 90 seconds. But for those last 30 seconds, the water warmed up just a tiny bit. Now you're told you have to repeat one of them. So, which do you pick? I mean, the choice is a total no-brainer, right? Less pain for a shorter time, or more pain for a longer time? Easy.
Well, you would think so, but no, not even close. In the real experiment, an absolutely staggering 80% of people chose to do the longer one all over again.
Just let that sink in for a second. The vast majority of people willingly signed up for 30 extra seconds of pain. On the surface, it's a choice that makes absolutely zero sense. So that's the big puzzle we're going to unpack right now. What on earth is going on in our heads?
All right, so the first big piece of this puzzle actually comes from a kind of surprising place, a medical study that looked at patients who are undergoing a colonoscopy.
So let's look at the data for two people. We'll call them patient A and patient B. Right away, you see patient B's procedure was way longer, 3 times longer, 24 minutes versus just 8. Now both of them hit the same peak pain level, a pretty rough 8 out of 10. But here's the kicker. Look at how their experiences ended. Patient A ended on a high note of pain, a 7. Patient B's pain, though, really tapered off, ending at just a 1. So, just looking at the cold, hard facts, who actually had the worst time? Who went through more total suffering?
I mean, objectively, it's patient B. Not even a contest. Their total amount of pain was just way, way more. But, and this is a huge but, when the researchers asked them about it later, patient A was the one who remembered it as a much worse experience. The reality of what happened and the memory of what happened were completely different. And this right here is our smoking gun.
So it turns out our memory isn't like a video camera, faithfully recording every single moment. Nope. It's more like a really opinionated movie director, following 2 very specific and very weird rules that totally warp how we see the past.
The first culprit is something called the peak end rule. Basically, our brain creates a quick and dirty summary of an event by averaging just 2 moments, the most intense point, the peak, and how it felt right at the very end. Everything else that happened in between, it just gets tossed aside.
And its partner in crime is duration neglect. And this one, well, it's just plain bizarre. The actual length of an experience, whether it was 8 minutes long or 24 minutes long, has almost zero impact on our memory of it. Our brain literally just ignores time.
So let's apply these weird rules to our 2 patients and see what happens. For patient A, you take their peak of 8 and their end of 7. The memory their brain creates is a pretty awful 7.5. But for patient B, you take their peak of 8 and their end of 1. Their memory summary is only a 4.5. Because of that better ending, patient B walked away with a less painful memory, even though they actually lived through a much more painful reality. So we've got this crazy conflict between what actually happens to us and what we remember happening. Kahneman gives names to these 2 forces inside our heads, and it helps to think of them as 2 totally different people. So let's meet them. First up, you have the experiencing self. This is the part of you that's living life from moment to moment to moment. It's the one that feels every single second of that cold water, every minute of that medical procedure. Its whole world is basically the question, how does it feel right now?
And then you've got the remembering self. This is your inner storyteller. It's the one that looks back on everything, pulls out the highlight reel, and crafts the narrative of what happened. It decides what the story meant, and most importantly, it's the one calling the shots for your future. So when you put them head to head, you really see the problem. The experiencing self lives in the now. The remembering self lives in the story of the past. The experiencing self endures every second. The remembering self completely ignores duration. But here's the crucial difference, the one that changes everything. The experiencing self is totally mute. It has no voice. The loud, powerful storyteller, the remembering self, is the only one we ever hear from. And this is where it all comes together. Because that storyteller is the only one with a voice, it basically runs the whole show. It dictates everything. Kahneman has a great name for this. He calls it the tyranny of the remembering self.
Kahneman tells this perfect story about a guy who was listening to a beautiful symphony on an old record. For 40 minutes, it was just pure auditory bliss. But right at the very end, there's a scratch in the vinyl, and it makes this horrible screeching sound. And the man declared that the sound ruined the whole experience.
But think about that. Was it really ruined? No, of course not. His experiencing self got 40 minutes of absolute musical joy that can never be taken away. It's only the memory of the experience that was ruined because his remembering self, following that peak end rule, threw out the 40 minutes of bliss and focused only on that awful ending. It's a powerful, powerful illusion.
So here's the mind-blowing takeaway from all of this. We don't actually choose between experiences. We choose between the memories of experiences. When you decide where to go on your next vacation, you're not trying to maximize the happiness of your future experiencing self. You're actually trying to build a trip that will create the best possible story for your remembering self to tell later.
And that brings us to the final, really big question to ask yourself. As you plan your future, as you look back on your past, who are you making choices for? Are you doing things for the self that has to actually live through every single moment, good and bad? Or are you just a storyteller, trying to craft the best possible memories? It's a distinction that might just change how you think about your entire life.